Welcome to Simply Sports Science, your go-to channel for making PE, sport and exercise science simple, clear and genuinely useful. Whether you're an IB, GCSE or IGCSE student or a teacher looking for high quality resources to help your teaching, this is the place to level up your learning. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Okay, so in this video we're going to begin the scientific investigation properly by tackling the single most important decision that you have to make. What is your research question? Everything that follows, your design, your data, your conclusion, depends entirely on getting this first stage right. Hopefully by the end of this video you'll know exactly what makes a strong research question, how to create one that works for you, and how to build the scientific background that earns marks and strengthens your understanding. So let's look at why your research question matters. Now, students often underestimate the importance of the research question. They jump into collecting data before they've fully decided what they're actually going to try and find out. But your research question is the anchor of your entire IA. A focused, measurable, scientifically grounded question sets you up for success, whereas a vague or overcomplicated question just makes everything else harder. A really good rule to remember here is if you can't explain your research question clearly in one sentence, you don't truly understand your investigation. A world-class research question has 4 essential qualities. It has a clear, independent and dependent variable. These should be measurable, realistic and appropriate for a school-based setting. For example, static stretching duration and counter movement jump height. Here the independent variable is the static stretching duration and the dependent variable is the counter movement jump height. The next quality is units and specificity where appropriate. Instead of does stretching affect jump height, a stronger version is what is the effect of 15, 30 or 45 seconds of static stretching on counter movement jump height in trained adolescents. You can see here that the question is far more specific and narrow in its focus, allowing you to be more focused in every other section to follow. Thirdly, it is a scientifically meaningful activity. It must link directly to physiology, biomechanics, or sports psychology, which are the core components of the sports science course. Whilst it's tempting to pick a subject on other areas of sports and exercise science, you must make sure that you can relate your study back to one of the key components of the course. The next quality is a system or context. Examiners want to see who or what the question applies to. For example, trained athletes or recreational participants or adolescent females, for example. When these 4 pieces come together, your question becomes more focused, it becomes easier to test, and it becomes much more academically defensible. So how do we go about generating a high quality research question? Well, the best starting point is to follow your curiosity. Ask yourself questions like, what part of human performance interests me the most? Which sports science concept do I understand well enough to do a thorough investigation into? Or what can I realistically test with the equipment and time available to me? Once you've thought about these things, then move into refining your idea by checking, is the independent variable something I can manipulate safely and ethically? Examples that would work well include caffeine dosage, stretching duration, cadence on a cycle ergometer, sleep duration, heart rate training zones, warm-up protocols, or balance or coordination tasks. And is the dependent variable something I can measure accurately? So good examples here would include reaction time, or jump height, or grip strength, or maximal repetitions, heart rate recovery, split times, or rates of perceived exertion. Then ask yourself, is the method practical with the resources that you have available? Don't design an experiment that requires a lactate analysis if you don't have the equipment in order to do that. Aim for simplicity done well, not complexity done poorly. And finally, ask yourself, does the question genuinely interest you? You're going to be working on this topic for weeks, so make sure you choose something you want to explore. Here are some examples that work consistently well within research questions. What is the effect of static stretching duration, for example 15 or 30 seconds, on counter movement jump height in adolescent athletes? Or how does caffeine intake influence reaction time in recreational runners? Or what is the effect of cadence, 60, 80, 100 RPM, on blood lactate accumulation during submaximal cycling? Or you could explore, how does the use of external focus versus internal focus cues affect tennis serving accuracy? Or how about, what is the impact of sleep duration, for example 5 hours versus 8 hours, on repeated sprint performance in trained males? Notice here that each one is measurable, controlled, ethical, and scientifically grounded. So looking at the opposite end of the scale, what makes research questions weak? Well, weak questions often fall into one of these traps. It's too broad. For example, does fitness affect performance? Is almost impossible to test meaningfully. It's too vague. What is the effect of nutrition on sport? Lacks measurable variables. Or it's too complex. Anything involving more than one independent variable or multiple outcomes becomes unmanageable for us. Or it's unethical or unsafe. So anything involving maximal exertion in untrained individuals, anything involving dehydration, sleep deprivation, or supplement misuse is immediately unsuitable for an IB Sports Science IA. Or finally, it's impossible to control. So, for example, weather-dependent tests or open outdoor environments can introduce excessive variability. If your question fits into one of these categories, refine it or rethink it. So now you've built your research question and you're clear in what it's going to explore. You need to build the scientific background to it, the first major assessed element of your IA. Now, this isn't a literature review. It's not about summarizing every study ever written. Instead, it's a more simplified version that should explain why your IV might influence your DV, why your independent variable might influence your dependent variable. And to do this, you can use the key principles from relevant sports science topics that you should have covered by this point. For example, for stretching, muscle spindle sensitivity or force production or length tension relationship. For caffeine, you'd look at adenoid receptor blockage. You'd look at increased arousal or faster neural firing. Or for cadence, you could look at metabolic cost, recruitment of muscle fibers, or lactate thresholds. Then consider what scientific theories support your prediction. Here's where you cite scholarly sources, peer-reviewed research that you can find through all of the obvious channels. You can use your academic textbooks for this, or reliable scientific papers that you can find on the internet. And then finally, consider why the research question matters in a real sporting or health context, because your investigation should feel grounded in the real world. If you consider all of these things, then this section of your work should show examiners that your question has genuine conceptual depth. So how much theory do you actually need here? Well, a good scientific context section is usually about 3 to 5 paragraphs long. More importantly, it needs to be clear and purposeful, and it explicitly is connected to your variables. Ultimately, it needs to be supportive of your eventual hypothesis. And if your theory doesn't help justify your experiment, do not include it. Okay, so now your research question is clear and your scientific background is starting to take shape. The next step is to form your hypotheses. Your hypothesis should be logical, evidence-based, and specific. It is not a guess. It's your scientifically informed prediction about what you expect to happen and why. For example, if you were exploring stretching and jump height, a strong hypothesis might sound like, based on existing research showing that static stretching reduces motor unit activation and force output, I predict that longer stretching durations will lead to lower counter-movement jump heights. Notice how that prediction has direction. It's grounded in real scientific principles and it ties directly back to the research question. The hypothesis itself isn't formally marked, but having a clear, well-reasoned one really strengthens the overall design of your investigation. It shows the examiner that you understand the science behind what you're testing and that your experiment is based on credible theory, not guesswork. Before you start building your method, you need to pause and check that your research question is genuinely ready. Ask yourself questions like, can I clearly state my independent and dependent variables, including units where necessary? Can I confidently explain the science that connects these two variables together? Do I actually have the equipment I need to measure the dependent variable properly? Can I control the main variables that might otherwise interfere with my results? And is the whole study ethically safe and practically realistic for a school setting? And finally, and probably most importantly, does this question genuinely interest me? If you can honestly answer yes to all of those questions, then you've got a research question strong enough to support a really high quality IA. And that puts you in an excellent position moving forward. So to summarize, your research question is the foundation of your entire scientific investigation. Once you get this part right, everything else becomes much clearer and far easier to manage. In the next video, we'll take your research question and turn it into a precise, controlled and repeatable method. The kind of method that meets the highest marking criteria and sets you up for reliable, meaningful data. Thanks for watching Simply Sports Science. If you found this helpful, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our IB Sports Science content. We've got revision guides, exam tips and clear explanations to help you be successful. And don't forget to visit us at www.simplysportscience.co.uk. Join us again next time where we'll keep making sports science simple.